What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Suit Hines Show. Today is August 18th, 2021, and in this episode, I have special guest Blake Jude joining me. How you doing today, Blake?
Doing great. It's been a pretty good day. I know preseason just started in the NFL, so I'm really excited.
There's so much stuff to talk about, especially football. We're going to be talking about some of these, top breakout performers we saw in preseason this past weekend because there was a lot of them. But it's kind of hard not talking about Tim Tebow, with the NFL. He was recently released yesterday. What are your kind of thoughts on Tebow being released?
Yeah, I mean, the signing itself was a bit of a head scratcher. It just kind of felt like Urban Meyer wanted to give a chance to a guy that he pretty much groomed in college. And, while it did make a lot of fans excited, it never really felt like Tebow belonged to the tight end position. So, playing out of position pretty well and also not really playing in the NFL for several years, I didn't expect much from Tebow. And I believe he only played like 12 preseason snaps in week one, and he didn't do much at all on those snaps. So kind of felt like, his one-time shot's pretty much over at this point. And so I am glad Urban Meyer decided to, actually like not use his bias and keep him. I'm glad that he decided to release him because it was pretty obvious that he was not at the same level as every other tight end on the roster. So I thought it was the right move. It's unfortunate to see. I would have loved to have seen some of the trick plays that might have been coming out from that, but obviously, Tebow's just not a tie. It's not going to work.
To me, it's like it was breaking news on ESPN, which to me is pretty laughable because, if you know anything about the NFL and anything about Tebow, there was pretty much a 99% chance he wasn't going to make the team. So I really don't understand why people, were surprised that why he was released. I was surprised in the fact that how quickly it happened, though. Obviously, he did not play good in that preseason game. He had a couple of blocks that went viral. They just, really, really bad plays. I was very surprised that his release happened so early. I thought it would have been closer as we got closer to the regular season. This was one of those situations. Lots of people are going to be talking now. He stole a roster spot from somebody else who has worked his butt off, and people can make that argument. But to me, obviously it does not work at all. Playing 12, 16 snaps in one preseason game and then you get released. This experiment sucked. But I am glad it happened, though, because, it's something different in the NFL. Tebow coming back, obviously one of the most popular quarterbacks and players in the NFL in general. He signed with the Jaguars, and within the same week he was signed, he was already in the top 5 of jersey sales. And, those jerseys, he has a fan base like no other player. To me, I'm glad this experiment happened, but at the same time, pretty much everybody knew this was not going to work out well. So it's just interesting with Tebow. I would say this was his final NFL chance. What do you think? Is there anything you think that maybe Tebow could happen next? Maybe broadcasting, football, baseball again, anything like that?
Well, he's definitely already got a career pretty well in broadcasting. He's been a part of the SEC network for quite a while now, doing college football previews. And I actually really like him in that gig. I think he's very talented as a broadcaster. And like you said, he has the fan base for it. There's so many people who are already out there supporting him. He is easily one of the most popular, quarterbacks in the NFL. And not even in the NFL at this point. So, there's without a doubt a bunch of opportunities for him. He did play baseball there for a while. So if he wants to go back to that, that's certainly a possibility. I doubt it, but there's a chance. And also broadcasting, anything like that could work out pretty well. And, like I said, I agree with you. I doubt there's any chance he goes back to the NFL. But if you were to, I could see a team maybe looking at him as a quarterback again. I don't know. That's just a reach possibly. But I would say almost for sure he's not going to go back into the NFL as a tight end. It would have to be a quarterback, and that would only be if he wants to do it, which is something that he has been back and forth on for a long time now. So it seems like Tebow's career is not going to go along the lines of announcing. I actually think it's a good idea because he is a really good announcer.
And, I was watching Pat McAfee's show yesterday, and they were kind of joking, talking about it. But the more you think about it, it might not be as crazy as some people as it sounds. What if the Texans would sign Tebow? I know, to me, if you take Watson off the Texans and then you add Tebow, I think that's a lot more realistic and fine with. But to me, if you have Watson on that team, not knowing what those allegations and everything like that, and then you bring Tebow, that's going to be a hot mess. You're going to have cameras everywhere on your team. But, the Texans are going to suck. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Their quarterback is currently Tyrod Taylor. They have a couple other, backup quarterbacks who has started in the past couple of years or so. Why not bring in a guy like Tebow? I mean, you're definitely going to have a top 3 pick in the draft. There's no doubt about it. Bring in a guy like Tebow. You're going to get the jersey sales. You're going to get ticket sales. Nobody's going to watch you play, but you had Tebow on your team. Then, people might want to see you play. Realistically, though, I doubt that will happen. But to me, the Texans are the only team that will make any sense for Tebow to come back in the NFL. But I really believe this was, like I was saying, Tebow's last chance to make it. I think broadcasting would make the most sense. And, going back to the SEC network, he's done a terrific job there. Definitely one of the best, guys there at ESPN. And this is not going to happen, but this is just for the fun of it. A couple years ago, The Miz was on Sports Nation. He said if we could have any athlete come to wrestling and be the ultimate heel, it would be Tim Tebow. Jacksonville, that's the headquarters of AEW. I think that'd be pretty cool to see Tim Tebow in AEW or even WWE. It's not going to happen, but if you, we're going to be talking about wrestling in a minute, but when you look at the ratings and decline over the past several years with, wrestling as a whole, if you bring in a guy like Tebow, you're going to get somebody who knows absolutely nothing about wrestling, and then, you're going to get tons of more viewers. I think that would be a smart idea for either AEW or WWE. I very, very, very much think this will not happen. But, if Tebow wants to explore, different routes and different sports, we've seen it happen with baseball. Nobody thought he was going to play minor league baseball. He was there for several years, never made it up to the majors. Tebow in AEW or WWE, to me, would be pretty, pretty cool.
Yeah, he could, if he would want to, he could definitely find his way onto one of those wrestling shows. And I do agree with you. I think it's pretty much a long shot. But, hey, if he wants to do it, I'm sure they'd have him and allow him with open arms. You talked about the Texans earlier. I do put Tyrod Taylor starting quarterback. Davis Mills, the 4th-round rookie, is their backup right now. Third guy, I believe, is Jeff Driscoll, former Bengal. And if Tebow were to join the Texans, it'd probably have to be a battle between him and Driscoll. And I really don't know if he would be able to beat out Jeff Driscoll at this point. You could argue he might. I don't know for sure. But, it seems like both the NFL and or really the NFL is pretty close to off the table. But if you would like to try it, I'm sure a team will give him a shot in training camp or something like that again and see what he can do. But I doubt he's ever going to actually make a 53-man roster again, at least. So pretty much career done there. MLB going to minor league team again, but at this point, it feels like that's almost overdue. And like I said, if you want to join WWE or AEW, it's possible. It really just depends on what you want to do. If you might be a broadcaster for SEC Network or ESPN, I'm sure he'll take whatever route he feels like is best. And I think that'll be announcing, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it wasn't announcing. I think the SEC network, it makes the most sense. And with, college football, as crazy as it sounds, I believe it starts next week. It's not really been talked about much at all. The SEC has been in the news quite a bit, with Texas and Oklahoma eventually going to be joining the SEC in a couple years. Cannot wait to see what Tebow does. Wherever he goes, the spotlight is going to surround him. Definitely one of the best, not a great quarterback by any means. Probably not even good, but definitely one of the most, nicest quarterbacks and players out there. So I kind of mentioned, wrestling. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, some of these week 2 performers, there was a lot of people who kind of caught my eye. So who were some players you were really impressed with on last week's games?
There was a lot of guys. A.J. Rose, the running back for the Minnesota Vikings, I think had a really good game, former Kentucky running back. I was really impressed with his vision and being able to just find holes and break through them really, really fast. Another name that plays for the Bengals I was really impressed with, Darius Hodge, Marshall outside line, who I've actually had a chance talking with quite a bit over the last couple of years. A sack and a half, 5 QB pressure, 5 QB hits, 1 tackle for a loss. He just had an overall really good complete game, one of the highest EFF scores for a non-third-round rookie. I thought that was really impressive. And of course, looking at some quarterbacks, I really thought Justin Fields' performance was pretty good for his first showing. He struggled at first. The first couple of drives, he struggled quite a bit, but he bounced back and was able to have a very, very good complete game. I believe he passed 14 for 18 attempts. So 14 completions for 18 attempts, I thought was very, very good. And overall, I think he just had a really strong game. Those are all the guys I was impressed with, but those are some of the biggest names that I recognize and remember.
Now, Darius Hodge, to me, that was definitely one that stood out as a Bengals standpoint. He was an undrafted free agent. Very, very unlikely heading into preseason that he was going to make the team. If he has another game like that, it's possible he could maybe end up making the team. It says on his stats he had 2.5 sacks, but when you watch the game, it actually seemed like he had more than that. He was just all over the field. Joseph Asai for the Bengals, he left the game early with an injury. He was phenomenal as well. Hodge and Asai had some of the top PFF rankings. A couple players to me. What's this? I don't know how to pronounce it. Not Steelers. The Patriots rookie running back from, I believe, Oklahoma, Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah,
he was absolutely phenomenal. Everybody thought, Sonny Michel is going to be the starting running back. They have an amazing running back committee in New England, and then you add him, who is just phenomenal. Definitely one of the better players of the week. It's really interesting with New England because year after year after year they have these nice running backs, but then they don't play a ton because they have a really nice running back behind them below the depth charts. A couple other players you mentioned, Justin Fields at the beginning of the game, he was not really impressive. He had a couple of fumbles, but as the game went on, as he really started to progress and got much, much better, I was really, really impressed with Fields, and because I wasn't really on high as him as some people thought, and I thought he played terrific. He had a really nice scramble for that 10-yard touchdown in the red zone. He got out of a sack there, and I thought he played phenomenal. And I know lots of people are kind of upset with Matt Nagy not naming Justin Fields a starter already, which to me, that is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think it would be smart to start Justin Fields after just one preseason game. We've looked throughout the years. There are tons of players who can have one good preseason game, then absolutely suck the rest of the time. So I don't think that's a great idea for the Bears to start Justin Fields in week 1, regardless of how good Fields plays in the preseason. One other person to me, my MVP candidate last year, it has to be Drew Locke. He was really good. 5 of 7, over 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was phenomenal. Had the 80-yard passing touchdown to KJ Hamler. And, his backup, I wouldn't really say backup, but the guy he's going to be competing against, Teddy Bridgewater, he was pretty good too. He didn't have many attempts, but I believe he only had 1 incompletion. To me, I really think, those were some of the top guys, performers, and this past week in the preseason. And that Locke and Bridgewater battle, to me, is definitely one of the more underrated battles, and something that's not being talked about that really should get more, hype as we head into the regular season.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to give a quick shout out to Tampa Bay safety. I don't remember his first. I remember his last name was Hagan. I thought was a very performer last week against the Bengals. So shout out to him. But to answer to go on about Drew Locke and Teddy Bridgewater, very fun matchup there. Drew Locke, I think, definitely had the better game, but Bridgewater was right up there. They absolutely dismantled the Vikings in their first preseason game this week or last weekend. I was really impressed with their performance altogether. It really felt like KJ Hamler and Drew Locke had a very good connection early on. I believe KJ Hamler had over 100 yards receiving in the game on 2 catches, of course, one being an 8-yard bomb. So that deep ball pass with him and Locke has been really working out so far. Jerry Jeudy's continuing to still be a very vital weapon for that team. Cortland Sutton, of course, is going to be there now. Noah Fant. There's a lot of weapons there for Drew Locke, and if he can continue to be very accurate and hit those guys in stride, he can be very successful. As a lot of those players have breakaway speed that can get deep that can allow us to get a lot of yards, possibly maybe even find. So a lot of talent in that Broncos offense. I think he just really on the quarterback now, and it really kind of feels like at this point, Locke maybe has the edge. And they've said that I believe Locke might be the week 1 starter right now. Bridgewater can definitely still beat him out at this point. There's still a lot to be done before week 1, so we'll have to see. But it feels like Locke starter, and I actually agree with that. I think that for the Broncos to be at their absolute best, it's probably going to have to be with Drew Locke at quarterback.
To me, heading into some of these week 3 games, players to watch out for, I think Drew Locke and Bridgewater have to be towards the top of the list because how phenomenal both of them play. Locke had over 150 yards and just 2 incompletions, but Bridgewater only had 1 incompletion, and put up some pretty nice stats as well. You mentioned KJ Hamler. You watch Drew Locke's game. I mean, you kept on seeing KJ Hamler get some targets. I think he might surprise some people this year. After that bomb, and he targeted him a couple other times. I was already trying to trade for him in my dynasty football league. But to me, I think that's a very, very intriguing. Some of those players to watch out for week 3 because if one of those quarterbacks can be consistent, they don't have to be great, they don't have to be horrible. Turnover-free football and like 200 passing yards, something like that. To me, Denver's easily a playoff team because all the talent they have. I mean, that's part of the reason why I picked them to be so good last year. Obviously that did not happen. A couple other players I'm really interested in for this upcoming weekend's games. What's his face? Matt Jones. I had a brain fart there. Matt Jones, I'm really interested in him. To me, that's one of those. I think the Matt Jones and Cam Newton situation is a little bit different comparing to Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. Matt Jones did not play as good as Justin Fields, but I would feel more comfortable with maybe Matt Jones starting week 1 than opposed to Fields starting week 1. I know Fields had a much better game. But you look at Matt Jones and all his talent he has around him. He's not going to have to play absolutely lights out to, help that team win. They have lots of talent on offense and a nice defense as well. And then you look at Justin Fields, which that's another player I'm interested to see. I want to see if he can continue to have another good game as well because despite me not thinking he should start week 1, I think, if he does have another really nice game, maybe he starts week 2 or 3. I just do not think that would be a great idea to start him week 1. And one other player to me would probably have to be Zach Wilson. He played pretty decent, but, he was not really talked about much as near as some of the other starting rookie quarterbacks like Justin Fields. He didn't play bad by any means. I'm going to see how he plays this week. To me, it's very interesting because with the Jets, Zach Wilson was my favorite quarterback prospect heading into the draft. And it's interesting with the Jets because you look at them, as we got closer to the preseason, it got so intriguing with Wilson. He was the last first-round quarterback to sign his contract. Up until he signed his contract, they did not have a quarterback who had played an NFL snap. But they did recently sign Josh Johnson, a former Bengal quarterback. And, it's that holdout to me was just very interesting, something I did not think, would end up happening. But Wilson, Fields, some of these rookie quarterbacks, and that Locke and Bridgewater battle to me, that's going to be the players I'm looking out for every single week because I think that's a closer race than people expect, and the outcome of that could have a huge impact on their season.
Yeah, I really like those answers. I definitely think that QB battles between Locke and Bridgewater as well as Newton and Mac Jones could be very key battles going into week 1. So I'll try to be a little bit different. I think one guy that I'm really looking forward to watching in this upcoming week is Trey Lance, quarterback from San Francisco. I think he's in another really big battle with Jimmy Garoppolo right now for the starting quarterback position. And if you ask me if the 49ers are going for a Super Bowl this year, I think there's a much better chance they make that with Trey Lance as a rookie than they do with Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo at this point is what he's not going to be anything better, and I think it's going to take a lot for 49ers to win with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. Meanwhile, Trey Lance is a guy that is still very raw, can make a lot of mistakes. He's not the most accurate quarterback. He does, like I said, make mistakes, but when it comes to arm strength, arm talent in general, he's far better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think that, as well as athleticism, he's also far more athletic than Garoppolo. And if they're going to reach their absolute ceiling, it's probably going to be a Trey Lance at quarterback. So that is one guy I'm really looking forward to seeing. Another guy that I think, ironically, for some reason, struggled week 1. He was a guy that I was really high on. I think all of us were. Penei Sewell, offensive lineman from Oregon, this guy that did allow a sack in his first career start, which is very, very rare from him in college. Rarely ever allowed sacks. So to see him do that kind of surprised us all a little bit. And I know there's a big magnifying glass right now on the Bengals and the Lions to see how Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell work out, because as we know, the Bengals ended up choosing Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell, and to see Sewell out of sack kind of surprised some people. So I want to see if he can bounce back this week and get better, because that's going to be a big time, a big time headline, I think, down down the line here in the next couple of weeks. And, a couple other names I am interested in seeing: Jackson Carman for the Bengals. I hate to stay on the Bengals topic, but it is important. The Bengals offensive line has been historically one of the worst offensive lines in history the last couple of years. And I want to see if Jackson Carman can hopefully take a step up and help improve this offensive line somehow. He's currently sitting in the third string of offensive linemen right now, and it does worry me whether or not he's going to see much playing time this year. I think he can earn it in preseason. He's going to have to have a pretty good, strong week 3 performance for me to believe that. So I'm interested to see how he performs. And you mentioned him earlier, Ramondre Stevenson's still a guy that I want to see some more. Damian Harris, Sony Michel, James White are all currently, at the top of that New England running back committee. But Ramondre Stevenson had a very impressive week last week, and I want to see if he can do it again, because the Patriots tend to go with the hot hand right now. And it seems like as of right now, the hot hand is Stevenson. So if he can continue to go that into week 1, we might be actually be able to see him a lot more.
You mentioned Trey Lance, and he had that, I believe, that 80-yard passing touchdown. But aside from that, he did not play, great. But then you look at Jimmy Garoppolo. With Garoppolo, you know what you're going to get. He's not going to elevate talent. He's going to be decent, not great, not horrible. But with Lance, he is raw, like you mentioned, and he is kind of out there at times. He has tons of potential. But to me, I agree with what you said there. I'm more comfortable with Lance starting, a guy who's never started an NFL game, than opposed to Garoppolo starting if I'm the Buccaneers and I'm trying to go to the Super Bowl, because even though Lance can be, inconsistent at times, you look at his potential. Some of this potential we haven't seen yet. Teams don't know how to scout a guy like Lance, because you watch him, and, the first time I watched him, to me, he reminds me a little bit of Wentz. And the more I watched him, I thought it was Deshaun Watson. And the more I watched him again, it was Josh Allen. He's the combination of a couple of very, very nice quarterbacks. I think he honestly could possibly be this best quarterback of this draft class. Trey Lance is definitely one of those guys. And then you mentioned Penei Sewell. To me, I feel like, when you haven't played football in a year and a half, you're going to struggle a little bit. We saw these headlines with, Jamar Chase not creating as much a separation as some people thought. But when you don't play for so long, when you set out of the college football last season, you're not going to come in here and just play lights out. You're not going to be this best player in the field by any means. When the last time you played, you're playing against sophomores in college. Now you're playing against pros who've been in the league for years. That's a major, major upgrade and a major change to how you play and everything. So Sewell is one guy I am interested in, because like you mentioned, not many people expected him to give up a sack, but it's because with, like you were saying, with this whole Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell situation, I've seen Bengal fans already say they've made the right decision at 5 taking Chase. Sewell was already trash and crap like that. That's the one thing I do hate about preseason, though, because one good game in preseason playing against some guys who might not play often, you have a great game and people tend to overreact. But, I think this is a very, very interesting week. And, the Bengals end up playing Washington, this Friday. And so what are your kind of thoughts, or kind of maybe, heading into the Bengals game on Friday, what are your maybe score prediction, and who are some guys you're really looking forward to watching the Bengals this week? I know you already kind of mentioned Jackson Carman, but is there anybody else you're kind of looking into? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, for sure. I think this is going to be a very interesting game, a fun game to watch. We do get to see the continued quarterback battle for the Washington football team. I know that Taylor Heineke, Ryan Fitzpatrick are currently battling. We're also going to see a little bit, I believe, Kyle Allen this week. So going to be a pretty fun matchup there to see all those 3 guys perform. This is going to be a very, very strong defensive line in Washington. So I really want to keep my eye on the offensive line as a whole. Deontay Smith, Jackson Carman, as I mentioned, the 2 rookies I want to keep an eye on and watch and see how they perform against this good defensive line. I also really, really want to see Isaiah Prince on the outside of tackle. I've been told that competition between him and Fred Johnson is still currently up for grabs. And if Isaiah Prince can somehow pull out a miracle and win this job, I think a lot of people would be surprised, but from what I'm hearing right now, it's not out of the question. So I would be interested to see how he performs as well. Chris Evans had a very, very strong performance last week. I'm not entirely sure if Travion Williams is going to be back and healthy, but if he is, I would really want to see how Travion Williams can respond to the fantastic games by Chris Evans and Jack Fitzpatrick last week. I want to see if he can put his name into the conversation again and see if he can make a roster spot. It's a big name. I kind of want to see how it works out. Also, Thaddeus Moss at tight end. I really wanted that tight end 3's job is wide open. I've been told it's between Mitchell Wilcox and Thaddeus Moss for that spot. Moss then got the upper leg in the first preseason game, and it seems like right now he's a better tight end in practice. I think this is a chance for him to really wrap up that spot and show that he is going to be the tight end 3 on the roster. So that's another big name I want to watch out for. There's a lot of guys. Darius Hodge I think is going to be another guy that I want to see again, but for the most part, I think it's going to be a really fun battle, and I'm really excited to see these back of the roster spots and see who can respond and answer to adversity.
A guy like Hodge to me is somebody really interesting because let's say if he has another really nice game, then all of a sudden a guy who really had no shot of possibly making the team all of a sudden has 2 really nice games. He could have maybe making the roster. But to me, Jackson Carman is one that really stands out because I know lots of people are really upset about him not being the starting guard. Michael Jordan was the starting guard. I kind of talked about it last week with Cincy Bengals pod. I know it might sound kind of crazy. I wasn't as mad as some, other Bengals fans because to me, I feel like Bengal fans and some people would say, Jackson Carman starting guard right now. He should work for his opportunity. He should not just be given a handout basically, because we're talking about a guy who was arguably a reach in the second round. He had some back injuries as well, and I feel like him not starting at guard and having Michael Jordan start at guard might work better for Carman in the preseason because it's going to motivate him, give more competition. You always get the best of your players when it comes to competition and something like that. You always get the best out of your players when it comes to competition. I'm working for a roster spot and trying to move up the depth charts. But I'm really interested in Carman. Honestly, though, I don't really see Michael Jordan starting off week 1 when we take on the Vikings. I'm interested in Chase, see how he plays, how much he plays. He only had 1 target for 1 reception last week. Some of these other guys, maybe Brandon Allen, he did not play great by any means. I want to see how he responds because, last season he's flashed some potential. Last year he played really nice against the Texans, but at the same time, they're one of the worst teams in the league. And then you look at a team like the Ravens where he just absolutely sucks. I want to see how he performs. And to me, it's really, really interesting with the Bengals because, there's so many players that are, you want to watch, and there's certain in particular players, but then there's other players like Mixon, Boyd, and Higgins. To me, honestly, I don't even think they should be playing in a game. I don't want to take a chance of them getting hurt in a meaningless game. It makes no sense at all. And this offensive line, I mentioned Jackson Carman, but the offensive line as a whole, we played great on the offensive line this past week against Tampa Bay, which I don't think many people expected us, our offensive line, to play that good. I know the Buccaneers, most of their starters did not play hardly at all. They did play Tom Brady, but it was only for 1 drive. Basically like that for their starters, only playing a drive or 2. But for the most part, I still thought our offensive line played terrific. And, Tampa Bay has a nice defensive line. You mentioned, Washington has a phenomenal defense. They have a great defensive line. Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, Chase Young, so many other nice guys as well. I want to see if we can play consistent on the offensive line. That's something we really haven't seen in, I would say, years. I would say 2015, 2016 was the last time we consistently saw a good offensive line. And since then, it's just been horrible, bad, horrible. It's never really been good. We've showed some potential, throughout the time last year. But to me, I really feel like Frank Pollock, I feel like he's going to make our offensive line much better than people expect. I know it's way too early, but, the indication, of last week's game, I feel like our offensive line might be a little bit better than people expect. But our offensive line, to me, I would say is probably the most intriguing, definitely position group as we head into this game Friday.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that you could argue the last time the offensive line wasn't absolutely terrible was when Frank Pollock was the offensive line coach. That was whenever we started to see the offensive line improve a little bit. And Of course, he left that season. Eric Taylor was hired as head coach, and Jim Turner was signed. And, of course, things went back downhill again. So I think there's certainly a case to be made that this offensive line can continue to get better now that Frank Pollock is the offensive line coach again. And I hope to see that. It's going to be a big couple of preseason weeks, I think, for this offensive line to see if they can get together. There's still a big question mark right now at right guard between Michael Jordan, Xavier Field, and Jackson Carman. There's still not a decided starter yet. I was told originally it was going to be Xavier Su'a-Filo. I'm hearing rumors now that it might actually be Michael Jordan week 1. I'm not entirely sure how true that is, but it definitely is something to monitor and pay attention to. It really feels like every other spot right now is pretty well handled. Hopkins should be a supposed starter for center week 1. You will Quentin Smith at left guard week 1, and of course the 2 tackles being Jonah Williams and Riley Reed. So I do think this offensive line is definitely improved. Is it great? Not by any means, but I think it's definitely improved when it comes to pass protection, and I hope the right guard can be figured out soon, because one of those 3 guys is going to have to take a pretty big step up, and I think that, as long as that's your worst offensive lineman of the group, I think you're doing okay. But they can't be a liability for the team. You can't have false starts every play. You can't have holding play. That's just something that's going to kill the team in the long run. So hopefully that won't actually happen, and they can find a good, reliable starter for that squad.
With the game Friday, I feel like it's another indication of maybe how this offensive line can improve. We saw the good performance last week, but if we see another good performance this week, against another really nice defensive line, then I feel like we can maybe have a slight sigh of relief in a way that Frank Pollock might be turning this offensive line around. I know it's preseason, but he kind of turned our offensive line around once, having Mixon lead the AFC in rushing. I'm very interested to see that. I mean, with the game Friday, there's actually a lot of stuff going on Friday. I mean, you had the Bengals and the Redskins play on NFL Network. You have, Friday Night SmackDown. You have AEW Rampage, which it's kind of not trying to be a spoiler. Everybody knows at this point. CM Punk's pretty much going to be for sure debuting at AEW Rampage on Friday. And then, you have SummerSlam on, Saturday, the next day. I mean, this is basically WWE's second biggest pay-per-view. There's so much wrestling stuff, that's throughout this week. And starting off with AEW, there was a very interesting situation that's actually still happening with AEW wrestler Max Caster. So Max Caster, he's basically like the modern-day version of John Cena's Doctor of Thugonomics years ago. And to me, I think him and Anthony Bowens, they're in the Acclaimed. They are definitely my favorite tag team. They're very, very entertaining. Definitely, I would say the most entertaining group right now in AEW. And a couple of weeks ago on, I believe, AEW Dark, he was rapping and stuff, and he mentioned somebody's name. And lots of people got upset because the guy's name, he was like, we're going to beat these guys up so bad. And he mentioned the guy's name, but he was actually in like some rape allegation. It turned out to be a false allegation. But still, people got really, really upset about it. So Max Caster he is without pay for 2 months. And there's lots of rumors he might be leaving AEW. He took AEW out of his bio. He's deleted pretty much everything AEW on his page. He started following NXT on Twitter, started liking posts from NXT. And just, I believe yesterday it was, he posted on eBay some of his not game use, but like his in-ring gear that he's wrestled against, like Jericho and MJF, the Young Bucks. Some of the top wrestlers in AEW, his ring gear, posted them on eBay for $500. It started to be trending on Twitter, and then all of a sudden it got taken down. So this is very, very interesting. Lots of people, for whatever reason, AEW fans thinks this is a work. Him basically trying to faking this and making the fans think this is real. Which to me, I don't understand why this would be a work. In my opinion, if you're going to have a work, why even suspend him 2 months without pay? Honestly. I know lots of people got upset about, the rap, with him and everything. You can listen. It's on YouTube. But honestly, I wasn't really – I had no issue with it. But with me, it's like there's been worse things said in AEW and more like I don't know how to describe it. Worse things happen there. You would think they would kind of get more upset with other things, but I just don't understand this whole situation. I don't think this is a work at all because he seems legitimately peed off at AEW. He's only following I believe 10, 11 people on Twitter. AEW is one and Tony Khan is one, but this does not make any sense. And I don't believe he's posted on Twitter hardly at all since this happened. And this is just very, very interesting. I don't see how this will work. I know how last year we kind of saw the Sammy Guevara situation. He got suspended, whereas an interview that happened years ago. He was talking about Sasha Banks, and he went to a rehab center to make him better or something like that for a couple months without pay, and then he came back. But to me, honestly, I think Guevara's situation was worse. That was a worse situation, and they did not have that into work. They didn't put that into a storyline. They took him off TV. They didn't have a storyline or nothing. They just took him off TV as soon as possible. He came back about 2 or 3 months later. This is, honestly, I think the Guevara situation is far more worse than this, and the fact that this is getting a more reaction, to me, is kind of wild. I think this is legitimate. I don't think this is the work, and I think this there's a strong possibility that Max Caster is probably done in AEW.
Well, for starters, if it's at work, props to AEW. They've gotten everyone engaged because it's pretty obvious the fans are very upset about this entire situation. I haven't actually had a chance to listen to everything that happened, but from what I can tell, that might be cutting it a little too far. I think we can all agree that. And though it is a mistake I think that he made, I do think a lot of the backlash that's being received could be a little overdone maybe. 2 months and no pay is a lot for a wrestler. That is a lot, and that is a pretty big deal. And if he is posting his gear and everything like that on eBay, if he's following NXT, if he's unfollowing AEW, it really leads me to believe that he is, his relationship right now with AEW is being torn. Now, if he does finish his sentence and come back, maybe things can be repaired. That's certainly a possibility. He might just be in the heat of the moment and upset. But if things continue to go downhill from now, and he continues to make poor decisions, like posting his gear on eBay, for example, there is a realistic possibility where he might be done with AEW. And not only that, though, with this allegation and now all these issues, is it even possible that someone like WWE would go inside? That's definitely going to be a red flag above his head for the future. So, if it was up to me, I would try to do my best to get back in good graces with AEW and fix the mistakes that I made. Because if he ends up becoming a free agent again, who's to say he goes anywhere else? I think a lot of companies would be worried about re-signing him or signing him at all due to what has happened now.
I definitely, if this is, this is legitimate, which I think this is, because if this is the work, like you said, this is very interesting by AEW, but I feel like if he's done with AEW, he's going to go to a much, much, much smaller company, maybe like a Ring of Honor, or maybe like a MLW, maybe a small company like that. There's no chance he makes it with WWE, in my opinion, or NXT. You look, and to me, I mean, like I was saying, he's the modern day, doctor of thugonomics. But, I was watching some of Cena's, raps, when he had that gimmick years ago. It's honestly crazy, some of the crap he got away with. And then back then, 15, 20 years ago, you watch now, you wouldn't expect that stuff to be on TV. And then you have Max Caster, who some of the things he said was not nearly as bad, as Cena's was. But it's very interesting. I don't see him in WWE or NXT or anything like that because I would say the Acclaimed, and especially Max Caster, you look at some of the people who are in AEW who would say more tend to cussing and more vulgar opposed to some other people. He's definitely towards the top of the list. And then we pretty much all know WWE, NXT, they're not that type of wrestling anymore. It's more so like kiddie-ish and stuff. They're not going to have a guy like him on there. Honestly, if you look at the AEW roster, I definitely think it would be one of the last people that WWE would sign from the AEW roster. It just does not make any sense. But it really is crazy to me, though, if he got suspended, I would understand it maybe for a couple of weeks, but 2 months without pay is honestly kind of crazy considering wrestlers do not make near as much as people make them out to be. Like they do not have a big paycheck unless you're a top guy like Cena, Reigns, Jericho, Omega. You're not going to be getting a ton of money. And with this, situation, it's crazy because for years wrestling fans have said they wanted the Attitude Era back, and we want. That was in the '90s with Jericho, Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, DX, everybody like that. And then wrestling fans lose their crap over this. This is I understand it was wrong, but I feel like wrestling fans overreact towards tons of stuff. We saw Rey Mysterio's daughter and Buddy Murphy. They were kind of in a TV relationship. I do think that was kind of weird, because there was a major age difference. But you look at wrestling fans complaining a ton, which that was pretty much things like this were an everyday thing back in the Attitude Era. It's crazy because wrestling fans want this wrestling to come back to what it used to be, and you want to see it great and everything like that. But when one teeny tiny thing happens, wrestling fans start losing their crap and they want somebody fired all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's a great point you make, because I think a lot of people do want the Attitude Era or something like that back into the WWE because, that was whenever the WWE was back in its prime. But I think at this point we've seen kind of the quote-unquote cancel culture here now and all that happens. There definitely are some issues that I think need to be addressed in certain ways, but I do think there has been a couple of overreactions, and that's caused companies like WWE to back off of that stuff now. By currently becoming much more of a PG company than what it was before, because your hands almost forced at this point because you don't want to have backlash from the media. So I definitely think that there is two ways to see it, and WWE and really AEW both, their hands are pretty much tied to be what they are, because if anyone makes a mistake like how Max Caster did, all of a sudden it's going to become a big problem, and they're going to have to figure out a way to fix it. So, like I said, it's just at the point of where all the companies are at. It's almost a new entire era of wrestling in general. I'm hoping things can be figured out over time. I'm hoping this is just a temporary thing, because it does cause a lot of conflicts and issues that are pretty unnecessary, but we'll have to see how in the future.
And you mentioned the cancel culture, and I'm not really going to get much into that because that's, some people think that's a touchy subject, but it's crazy to me because, like I mentioned, I was just watching Cena's stuff just like a day or so ago. If somebody would watch Cena's stuff, the cancel culture, stuff like that, they would try to get him canceled because, I'm all for jokes and stuff, but some of the stuff he said, I'm going to say bad stuff, but some of the stuff, you would not really expect, especially a guy like Cena to say on live TV. And, people want the Attitude Era back, and it's never going to come back. I really feel like, AEW is much, much, much more edgier than WWE. But I really feel like AEW right now is going to be the closest thing we ever get back to the Attitude Era. It's not going to be like it was in the 90s. This is as good as it's going to get, edgy-wise, cussing, stuff like that. Something that we haven't really seen from WWE in a couple of years. But, lots of people want it back. This is as close as we're going to get it. So it's going to be interesting. But, with CM Punk, more than likely him debuting Friday. It's crazy because it's like CM Punk's going to debut in AEW within a week. And AEW has signed Daniel Bryan, and it seems like that signing has basically just gone unnoticed at this point because everybody wants the eyes on CM Punk. I cannot wait for that. AEW is supposed to be in Cincinnati next month. I really, really want to go to that because it's actually the first episode after their pay-per-view, and they always have a huge pop, a huge surprise guy come after the first pay-per-view. I'm hoping that's, Daniel Bryan, which would be Bryan Danielson. But, who knows? And, also there's some big wrestling and the WWE, this weekend, like I mentioned, SummerSlam. So kind of like a SummerSlam preview, just talking about a couple matches here. So Goldberg and Bobby Lashley, for one of the titles. This should not be happening at all. Goldberg should not be in a title match. It's just so stupid, and it goes back to the WWE, why people do not watch them. They give title matches to people who have no business in being title matches. That literally a guy in his contract who has 2 matches per year, and you give him a title match in both of those matches. It is absolutely crazy to me. I don't think Goldberg has had a match since he returned several years ago and SummerSlam to face Brock Lesnar. I'm not for certain, but I think every single match Goldberg has been in has been a title match since. I could be wrong, but the more I sort of think about it, I think I'm right. But this is just absolutely crazy. I will say this is interesting because I was reading some articles about Bobby Lashley. They're making Bobby Lashley how Brock Lesnar was several years ago. When he was crushing everybody in 2 minutes or less. The Suplex City. Was kind of SummerSlam 2014, I believe. He demolished Cena. People were peed off. It was a horrible match. It was a squash match, and I feel like if you have Bobby Lashley, which that's he's going to beat Goldberg. If you have a squash match against Goldberg, which that's what he's known for, is having a match in like 5 minutes or less, end up winning. I feel like that can elevate Bobby Lashley to the next level, but I also kind of feel like, why are you having him? It just not make sense to me. I feel like having somebody who's kind of on WWE's current roster, who's already the top guy, would make much more sense. I know in the squash match that would bring them down a little bit, but having a guy, now I know Rollins is in the Edge feud, but having a guy like towards Seth Rollins' tier instead of having a title match to this guy who does not deserve it at all. I feel like Lashley will win this one. This will probably be one of those matches like a squash match in 2 minutes or less. I would say there's a 0% chance that Goldberg would finish this one with a win.
Yeah, no, I agree. I expect Lashley to be the winner if it's just the match is clean, of course. I do think there's an underrated possibility. Maybe see Big E cash some money in the bank in this match. I think it's certainly a possibility. Goldberg's at the point now in his career where he is too old to make any lengthy matches. So I think this match is probably going to be at 5 minutes or less, like you said. I doubt it's going to be anything too big. I think the two main options, at least in my eyes, are either Bobby Lashley wins in a quick squash match, possibly, or we see the match get a little late. I think Lashley still wins, or Goldberg wins. One of the two, Big E cash in the Money in the Bank and the title. I think those are the realistic possibilities right now. That would be the only thing that makes sense to me, personally, for Goldberg to be there, is to have a guy that could definitely slow Bobby Lashley down enough for Big E to take advantage of it and win the title. I think that makes the most sense because at this point, Lashley is so much further up than any face right now on Raw. It feels like any loss that he would have is unrealistic at this point. He did have a couple matches there with Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston where he did drop to Woods, and a lot of fans were upset that he was losing all of his big bad Brock Lesnar like kind of mojo, like you said. So I think they're trying to build that up now again with Lashley, but they're gonna have to find a way to take the title, or with Goldberg, excuse me. But they're gonna have to figure out a way to take the title away from him eventually, and it feels like it's gonna have to be Big E who takes that title. And what better way to do it than to have him, beaten up all over, beating Goldberg, and then all of a sudden Big E catches at the perfect moment. So I think it makes the most sense, at least in my eyes. But I definitely think at the end of the match we'll probably see either Lashley or Big E staying tall with the title.
Yeah, that would make quite a bit of sense there, but this is just crazy. I know I mentioned it. Goldberg should not be in this match. I mean, 2 matches a year. Both these are title matches. He had a title match against McIntyre at the Royal Rumble. That match, I believe, was like 4 or 5 minutes, and that was actually a longer match than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like a 2-minute match. And you never know with the WWE, they could put the title on Goldberg. And, that would just, the low viewership of Raw, what they normally would get, that's going to even bring the ratings even down even more. And then there's the other championship match, which to me, that this is the obviously premier, title match. This is the one everybody's wanted to see forever. And it's honestly crazy because, obviously this has been one of the best feuds, I would say, since this whole coronavirus started last year with no fans. It's crazy because this is going to be phenomenal, but in a way it's kind of being overshadowed by the CM Punk with AEW, which is crazy because you would not think that would happen. Cena against Reigns. There's no chance Reigns wins this. They've done this perfectly. Cena comes back for the second biggest event of the year. He's going to have the title record. It just makes so much sense. And this is just amazing chemistry by Reigns and Cena. I was reading an article a couple of days ago, and the article, the one of the most recent SmackDowns, one where Cena mentioned Ambrose and Roman Reigns mentioned Nikki Bella having some jabs at each other. Most of that was actually unplanned, and their chemistry is just phenomenal. You look at several years ago, they had that amazing feud just for 1 month. I thought that was one of the best feuds WWE's had in quite some time. But there is zero chance Roman Reigns will win this. This is Cena to get the title. He's going to get viewership back on Raw, which they desperately need. And it's interesting because you don't know how long Cena is going to be with WWE again. I saw something yesterday. I don't know if it was true or not. That movie he was in that came out a week or so ago. Supposedly he's having a spin-off show with that. I don't know how much truth there is to it with that character. But if that's true, we would not expect Cena to be with WWE for a long time. But if that's true, even less than we kind of originally thought. But Cena's definitely going to win this one here to get the title record. And having against Reigns to me makes so much sense. I could not have a better feud than Reigns and Cena for Cena to break the title record.
I definitely think it's a wild card to be Finn Balor to see what happens there, because this entire match, for people that don't know, was started because it was supposed to be Finn Balor, Roman Reigns, and Cena or Baron Corbin crashed it, ended up throwing Balor out, tried to sign the contract, and then Cena threw Baron Corbin out and then signed the contract. So, kind of in a certain way, Cena kind of took the title match from Balor. So, if Cena does not somehow win, I think there is possibly a possibility of a heel turn for Finn Balor betraying John Cena in a way. I don't know if that happens. I could also see a scenario where maybe Balor helps Cena win in some way, and that kind of sets up a future feud between Balor and Cena. We'll have to see how it works out. But it would make a lot of sense for Cena to get his record-breaking title against Roman Reigns, who's been built up as an absolute beast. But it would not shock me if Cena wins the title, keeps it for like a month maybe, and then loses it again to either Balor or Reigns again. Because it just seems like at this point he's just going to be in WWE for just a pretty short stint just to go back to making movies again. It would be a really fun match to watch. It's definitely going to be a potential match of the year candidate, I think, for sure. But we'll have to see how it all works out in the long term before I make any true judgments about the entire rivalry.
And you mentioned Finn Balor, and it's crazy because you look at wrestling. You look at when he won the title at SummerSlam against Seth Rollins. When he got hurt, you can honestly say that's one of the biggest what ifs in not just WWE, but what ifs in wrestling history. Because you look at it, Finn Balor gets hurt. Then you have Kevin Owens win the title, and that fatal 4-way match on Raw. Obviously, in my opinion, the most shocking Raw of all time when Triple H turned on Seth Rollins. You have Owens and Jericho with each other. You had a face Rollins, who you really honestly did not know what the crap you were doing with for a year or so. But and then you look at Owens and Jericho. Jericho goes to New Japan for a little bit. Tony Khan eventually. If Jericho didn't do all that stuff, there would have been no AEW simply because Finn Balor gets injured at SummerSlam. It's crazy how much storylines can change and how much one thing leads to another when it comes to wrestling. But let's say if Cena wins the title at SummerSlam, maybe Survivor Series. I doubt Cena will stay that long. But if he does, wonder if it'll be like Cena against Finn Balor. But when big matches, Finn Balor will occasionally have like the Demon King persona. If he has that against Cena, and then if Balor wins, that can be his main championship he's won it since. That's going to be like 5 years from now, which is just absolutely insane. It's been that long. But then you finally get Balor for what he used to be from half a decade ago. You can finally have him what you wanted him to be. But due to that injury, he's not been the same what he was when they were sort of building him up, with the brand split and everything. I feel like that would be honestly probably the best booking for AEW if Finn Balor would beat Cena. Because you look at Cena and Reigns, obviously they're top, and I would put Orton up there too. If you have a championship match against them, and if you beat them, that's going to make you so much more high on people's list. That's going to get you over a ton. Then you have a guy like Balor who, I mean, honestly, I've not watched WWE much, but it seems like they haven't really had a set in stone major thing for him, for sure, since that just championship thing years ago. I feel like if you put him and Cena at Survivor Series, if he beats Cena, I mean, all of a sudden, Finn Balor is one of the top guys in and WWE like it was supposed to be years ago.
But that, and I think that protected persona. I don't think he lost the match yet, so the Demon itself is already far over. And he went to NXT there for a short stint and won the NXT Championship, and then took it and lost it to Karrion Kross later on. But I think now that he's back, I think WWE has bigger plans for him. It really feels like he could be a huge member of this potential rivalry between Cena and Reigns. I could see a possibility where he turns himself into a triple threat, turns it to the Demon, and somehow takes the title from both Reigns and Cena, which is crazy. But it does at the same time be super cool and can lead to a lot of potential future matches between, Reigns and Balor, Rollins and Balor, a lot of those different, dream matches, I think, for a lot of people. And I think it'd be really exciting. That's what I'm personally hoping for, but I think we leave SummerSlam with Cena as a title winner during this match between him and Reigns. And then I could see a possibility where it turns into a triple threat match or something like that in the future with Balor.
I mean, there's so much to talk about, with wrestling and the NFL. College football's coming back next week, which is crazy. But I mean, especially just this weekend and this week, honestly. I mean, every single day there's wrestling on TV. CM Punk's coming back, SummerSlam. Cena's going to break the record. This is wrestling the past couple years hasn't really been great. But I would say now with Cena, back on weekly TV, and with the signings in AEW and some of these top feuds like Reigns and Cena, this is the best time to be a wrestling fan. And I would feel like this has potential to be the best product we've seen in wrestling as a whole in quite some time. This is going to be a fun couple of months, with these signings and how long ever Cena is with WWE. It's going to be really interesting there. I mean, we have the regular season coming up in a couple of weeks. There's so much to talk about, but it kind of really about does it for the day. We kind of talked about Tebow's release, some breakup performers in last week's games of the preseason, some players to watch out here in the upcoming weekend games in preseason as well, the Max Caster situation in AEW, and a SummerSlam preview this Saturday when it's Cena against Reigns and Bobby Lashley against Goldberg. So, Blake, can you tell some of the listeners who's going to follow you on social media? I'm on mute.
Yeah, feel free to follow me on Bengals Instagram page at StripeHypeAllDey. I post all Bengals content there. Also, check out my website, BengalsInsiders.com. My Twitter is at Blake Jude 714. I post Bengals stuff, NFL draft stuff, all that. And also go check out my new podcast, the Stripe Hype All Day Podcast. Our good friends William James and Nathan Amsden. We do weekly Bengals updates and stuff. So we just did a post-game recap from week 1 yesterday. So if you're a Bengals fan and want to check that out, I highly suggest you do. It's on Spotify right now. Just search Stripe Hype All DEY Day on Spotify, and you can be able to listen to that. Thank you so much for having me on. It was a great podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining everything. Anytime you want to join, you're more than able to. You're gladly on the show. Make sure to put those links in the description. Make sure to go check out, his new podcast on Instagram, Twitter. Follow him there. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to go follow me, the Sports Through Hines Show, on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll see you all next time on the Sports Through Hines Show.